Bluegrass has been a church in the Methodist tradition from its start in 1824. John Wesley was the leading founder of the Methodist tradition, which includes many denominations and churches involving millions of people around the world. In the 1700s, as an ordained clergyman in England, Wesley experienced a personal spiritual renewal that caused him to preach revival and social reform throughout England. It became such a powerful spiritual movement, it not only transformed England, but the movement spread to the States where it became its own church in 1784. Bluegrass is here because of Wesley's passionate faith and gifted organizational skills, which opened up the way for many to follow in his footsteps. Bluegrass member Joan Wheeler Mensel is directly connected to two of the founding families of Bluegrass. One of those founding families, John and Elizabeth Hilliard, has a direct connection to John Wesley. So the roots of our church going back to England and one of your direct descendants. So would you tell us a little bit about that connection and to you, but also the connection to Wesley?
Elizabeth Hilliard is my 4 times great-grandmother. They had invited Wesley into their home and church, and he said she, as a small child, had put on her bonnet for church, like we all, get dressed up, especially for Easter. And she had put a bow on, and Wesley made the comment, "Is that a bow upon Betty?" And so it was too frivolous for John Wesley. And so that's one of the stories that deep roots and connection to John Wesley with the Hilliard family.
Your family by which you get your name,
Yes.
Wheeler, Mark Wheeler, and his family also coming from England. Tell us about that journey, because it's kind of hard to imagine how difficult that journey was.
We are fortunate enough that we have a transcribed copy of his diary when they came over in 1822. He and his wife, Elizabeth Roberts Wheeler, and they had 5 kids aging starting at 16 down to a 1-year-old. And he commented about seeing the icebergs and how the ship pitched and rolled, but they constantly had prayer. There was singing. They even they went like 200 miles in 24 hours, but they always had, was grateful. They had very strong faith, stronger than mine, I feel like sometimes, to take that chance and to come to a new world for their religious freedoms. Mark Wheeler's story is Bluegrass's story. If they would have, hit an iceberg, if they would have, the ship rolled over, such faith and that we're all here. And so I feel like this is Bluegrass's story. It's not just mine.
So Reverend Joseph Wheeler was a brother to Mark Wheeler, and he too came from England, and he was ordained clergy in England, but ended up here. Can you tell us more about him and his family and what brought him here?
He was converted at 15, and then at 18 he became a minister. He did mission work on the streets in London. His wife's family are the Earleys. He was Sir John and Lady Elizabeth Earley, and their daughter Elizabeth was as a small child, sat on John Wesley's lap and recited the Psalms. They came over from England to escape religious persecution from the Church of England in 1819, and he traveled. He was actually Oxford educated. On the boat, he had his whole library, and it became damaged and dampened by the sea and sea salt. But he started his, preaching here and lighting the fire for Methodism in this part of the country. But they also left a nice stone home in, the luxuries at the time in 1819 of a big city, London, and moved to a log cabin home. And she gave up everything and talked about the wildlife of Indiana, and, panthers, wolves, bears, I'm sure, and just how scary it was at night, all the howling. But you can imagine leaving that life and all those worldly possessions. Her parents owned a blanket factory, so they were very well to do. And to move here and leave that all behind because of your religious beliefs.
So even after Wesley, Wesley endured some persecution, some trouble preaching out on the street, his message, the method by which he did so. And evidently those who followed after him continued. I understand Reverend Wheeler continued to preach in the streets in London as well, just as Wesley had done. And so it wasn't a popular message. It wasn't the popular way. And so obviously they felt like they had to get away in order to be free in the expression of their faith and that personal faith that they had. And I think it's rather remarkable that, what led them here, religious persecution, that's kind of the roots of bluegrass, roots of Methodism in this area. And earlier this year, we decided, without really knowing this at the time, that we would, for our 200th anniversary, we would sponsor water wells in Nigeria, which is recorded to be the most persecuted country for Christians in the world currently. And so our mission project ties to our history. And so that original fire and flame that burned so brightly and Wesley and then among the Wheelers and the Hilliards is continuing to burn and spread around the world today.
Yes.